I went in, I'm very type A. So I had everything really written out. I, had everything. I practiced like exactly what I was going to say, all this kind of stuff. And I go in and I present it all and I just get a flat no.
I love bookkeeping.
Hey, great bookkeepers. This is Ben Robinson, and welcome to the I Love Bookkeeping show. I am joined today by somebody awesome, a great guest, and we will get to that here in just a second. But real fast, I want to make sure that if you want to get show notes, if you want to listen to all of the shows that we've done on I Love Bookkeeping, then head on over to that website, ilovebookkeeping.com. There you'll find an episodes page, which has, guess what? All of the episodes on there, along with show notes and some other goodies. We also have an application on there for you to be a guest so that, hey, if you want to come on and let me help you with your opportunity, your challenge, kind of give people the lay of the land and your story and how you become a great bookkeeping professional, that would be wonderful. And finally, any of the courses that are talked about here or on other podcasts that we have are on the I Love Bookkeeping page as well. Now, let's get into the fun part of this. We got a great guest with us today. She is what she proclaims to be a Midwest girl at heart, and she loves the outdoors. She loves camping, hiking, whitewater rafting, and climbing. And she has a 9-month-old puppy named Milo, which she may be getting some sleep. And she and her husband have been married for right spot on 4 years. So welcome to the I Love Bookkeeping show, Jessie White. How are you?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. We were talking right before the show. You said you just got back from a trip to Colorado Springs.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Beautiful out there. When I was in the Air Force, I got to spend some quality time at the Academy in Peterson Air Force Base. So, yeah, good for you.
Yeah,
good
it was so much fun. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Was there still a lot of snow in the area on Pikes Peak?
There was on Pikes. Yeah, it was cold up there, about in the upper 30s, low 40s. So we were wearing, shorts and tank tops on the bottom. And then when we went up there, we were in winter coats and gloves and stuff. So it was crazy.
It's amazing on a summer day that place can go through 3 seasons pretty darn fast, in 12 hours of light. So awesome. Well, again, thanks for being here with us today. So what part of the country do you live, Jessie?
I'm in St. Louis.
St. Louis. Okay. You a Cardinals fan then?
More of a Blues fan, but I like the Cardinals too.
Okay. All right. Go Blues. That's right, because they're in the NHL Finals right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
First Stanley Cup game. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Awesome. Good for you. So let's talk about bookkeeping. With a show like I Love Bookkeeping, we probably have to talk a little bit about that, not the Blues and Colorado. But so what made you get into the bookkeeping profession, Jessie?
Sure. So great question. Kind of some backstory on my journey. So taking us back to 2017, my background is actually in education. So I was a high school teacher, not math, unfortunately, world history. Yeah. So I taught high school world history for about 4 years. And during that year, it was kind of like spring 2017, I was going to my boss and I was like, hey, I'd like to teach some new classes. I'd like to take on some more responsibility. It was like my 3rd year. And I went in, I'm very type A. So I had everything really written out. I, had everything. I practiced like exactly what I was going to say, all this kind of stuff. And I go in and I present it all. And I just get a flat no, like no reason, no nothing. And I was like, okay. So I kind of walked out of the office. Yeah. And I was like, my days here, I think, are numbered. It's just, I'm 23 years old and I've hit this, glass ceiling, and I wanted more freedom to really explore like the edge of my skills and really push myself. And so fast forward to summer 2017, I stumble upon BBL, like many people, I think, through the Penny Hoarder, I think it was, or the
Penny Hoarder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I found them, and I was like, I have no idea what bookkeeping is, but this sounds really interesting because I don't have to have a boss anymore, and I can really like push myself and have the freedom to do that. So I watched the webinars. Back then it was BBL 2. And so then, on Eclipse Day in August, I pulled the trigger, signed up, and launched my business in October and got my first client in November. Never looked back.
Wow. So were you still teaching?
I taught up through October. And there were some other things that were going on with our leadership. And so it was a good time for me to step out of that role and into full-time with my business.
Okay. Awesome. I like
Yeah.
that fact that you never look back. I want to drill down on something. I'm a math guy, and you said 3 years, and at 23, you'd hit a glass ceiling. So, like, did you graduate high school like Doogie Howser or something, like at 18?
No, 20. So I must have been 24 because
Oh, okay.
it was like 2.5 years at that point. Yeah, sorry. 20,
Okay.
23, 24, whatever. Yeah. I
Still,
was young.
that's,
I was young.
yeah, yeah. Being a guy that I went in the Air Force, didn't graduate college till I was 28. I admire people that can do it in their early 20s. So kudos to you for that. Yeah. So, were you looking at any other possibilities of businesses that you could start, or was it just bookkeeping because you stumbled across it?
So I was looking at applying for other teaching jobs, but in the back of my mind, I was like, this could happen again. Like I could be
Hmm.
under poor leadership again, and I just that really scared me that I didn't know exactly what I would be getting into if I signed up for another full-time job. So I was looking at some other businesses, some VA, virtual assisting, but none of it was like matched my personality of like I love the marketing aspect of like talking to small businesses and networking, and then my type A person, like introvertness, gets to like do the numbers and like really focus on that. So it just kind of like checked all the boxes of what I was looking for, which is crazy because I didn't even know what it was prior to looking at that article.
Wow. And you'd never done bookkeeping, accounting, anything like that in your life?
No, I'd grown up like with kind of like the Dave Ramsey and like budgeting. So I knew how to like run our finances as a household. And so bookkeeping, it's just like taking that and multiplying it times, multiple streams of income, so many expenses and like that kind of thing. So it worked out that I had that background, but I've never done anything bookkeeping with just businesses prior to that.
Oh, good for you. Did you find learning the bookkeeping part of it challenging, or did it just come to you?
It was challenging. I mean, the BBL itself, like it's so comprehensive and there's so many places to review. I found myself like going through the modules, getting to the end of it, being confused, but then I would just like review, practice. I would explain a lot of it to my husband, which helped a lot. Like, hey, this is what I learned today. Just because that's a great way to learn things is to like communicate it to other people as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then as I went, like the gap started to be filled, I guess, as like you looking at this big picture and then you kind of zero in, and as you go, everything starts to make sense.
Yeah. So is it fair to say that you, up through your life, enjoyed numbers? Maybe didn't love them, but at least enjoyed them?
Sure, yeah, I love like just the organization of it and like knowing, where the money's coming from, where it's going, and what the big financial picture looks like is definitely something I enjoy.
Yeah. And we often have people that go, look, this all sounds great, but I hate numbers. I'm like, then this is like you wanting to become a doctor saying, I don't like blood.
Right,
Sorry,
yeah.
comes with the
Mhm.
territory, right? So we don't have to be a numbers nerd, but we at least have to enjoy them, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
them, not have a phobia of them. So good for you on
Mhm.
that. Um, so you said you got your first client in when? November of
Yes, November.
2017? So,
Mhm.
and you started in August. So that's pretty quick in relative terms to get one, to go through the training and get that. Let's talk about that very first client. Like, how did you get this person?
Sure. So it was a startup, which is kind of cool with what we're talking about today. They
Right?
just needed setup in QuickBooks Online. So it wasn't a monthly client. And I had kind of shied away from like really big commitments just because I was starting out. I was confident in what I knew, but the baby steps were kind of like what I wanted to follow through with at that point, which was perfect because then by tax season, I'd had some smaller clients and some smaller jobs, and I was kind of ready for that. So first person that came to me was a startup, and she needed to be set up in QuickBooks Online. And she was close enough that we could actually do it in person, which was really cool. So I drove about half an hour, it wasn't too bad, to her place, and I was so nervous. Like, it was just setting her up, which I do now, like with my eyes closed basically. But at the time I was like in front of my first client and like I was super nervous, but it all went totally fine. Like, and I was able to do some training with her and kind of show her some things. And yeah, it went great.
Awesome. Let's talk about something that didn't go great, because I know that every business has its challenges. So before we kind of answer that, how many clients do you serve now, Jessie?
So currently, okay, so I'm at 15 monthly clients, and then I've got like 2 that I do just at year end because they're so small, and then I've got 1 that I do quarterly, and then I do some financial coaching as well as like a completely different
Okay.
service. So,
So roughly 20 clients or so.
yeah.
All right. So you and I both know that it's no gravy train to get from where you were, no clients
Sure.
in November of 2017, getting that first client to where you are today. So how have you done that, right? You got the first one. What method, who introduced you to this person? The
So
first client you got?
my first client was LinkedIn. I would say most of them have come from LinkedIn. The LinkedIn mining and the training that we do in BBL really just painted a picture for me. I'm in a suburb of St. Louis, which is perfect as far as like that strategy goes, because there's just so many people here that need help.
Right. Absolutely. So it's funny. The previous podcast that I did, that I recorded actually, because as you guys know, these are not live. Sorry to bust your bubble if I was the first one ever telling you that. But the one I did before, the guy said, LinkedIn, there's no way I'll do that. I got no effectiveness. And then you hear somebody like you that gets all their clients.
That's
And it's like,
hilarious.
hey, that's one of the things I talk about and we talk about and you learn and I learned is that you don't want to rely upon one marketing way. Right. And so the fact that it worked for you and then for Dave Rice, who I interviewed, it didn't work for him and he was almost bashing it. It's so funny.
Yeah.
Some people love things and it's like that with everything. And some clients are great to be found on LinkedIn and others not so good. And so that's a keen observation. Any other ways other than LinkedIn that you've been getting those clients?
Yeah. So LinkedIn, I would say, was like my big launching point of like just how I was meeting people. And then my second big wave was through a couple of CPAs that I've built really strong relationships with. One in particular, she's like 5 minutes away, which is kind of cool, right down the road. But she kind of took me under her wing during the first tax season. And she gave me even just like some minimal tax, kind of like data entry stuff to see if I enjoyed it. Because I was kind of in between, like, do I do more tax stuff? Am I looking at consulting? And so she was able to give me some responsibilities in that way. And then, yeah, she's referred me clients and it's a great relationship.
That's awesome. How did you meet how did you meet her, the CPA?
Her, I believe it was Alignable. I was on Alignable for a little bit. I don't do that anymore. But I think that's how I met her. And then we found out that we had a bunch of mutual connections as well.
That's awesome. And that's a keen observation there again, is that you almost have to hit every medium because you never know where that relationship's going to come from. You plant a lot of seeds and you never know which one's going to harvest. And there you go, right there.
Especially at first, yeah.
Oh, yes. Yes. And then you start to kind of, LinkedIn is really working well. This referral partner strategy is working well for me. So that is really good. Was there a time, so you've been working for somebody else, I assume, getting up early every single morning, going into a school, having kids that are just totally respectful and behaved, I'm sure, because that's how all teenagers are. At least I was. Let's put it that way. Not. So was there a time when you were, in the last year or so, were you like, oh my gosh, this is so awesome compared to where I was before? Was there a moment that you can remember?
Every day of my life. I'm so serious. I've been really intentional the last couple months of like setting aside time for myself, especially during tax season. Like the work is never ending. And just like you talked about this actually in BBL, like the business can become a monster and like it can consume your life, and just being really intentional about taking time out for you. And so I've been doing that these last couple months, and I just like, I sit outside during lunch and watch my dog play and checking all my plants and stuff. And it's just like every single day I'm so thankful. Like I'm so, so incredibly thankful, like that I can set my schedule. I remember when my sister moved to Pennsylvania, and I could kind of schedule my work around like when she was going to be home, and just the flexibility and freedom of that is just priceless. It really is.
That's great. Yes. Would you ever want to go back to work for someone else now that you've tasted this?
Don't think that I could. I really don't think that I could. I know you talk about like you make us, what is it?
Unemployable.
Unemployable. Yeah. I am completely and totally unemployable.
Yes, I am too. And that's really, it can sound derogatory, but that's actually a positive thing, because once you taste that freedom, and, it's not easy, right? So let's kind of, I want to wrap up this section here, but what was like a struggle? I don't want to make this seem like it's easy, because starting a business isn't easy. Is there one particular struggle that you had to overcome?
So recently I actually shared 3 huge struggles that could have ended the business. And like, I could have thrown in the towel and just said like, this is it. It's too hard. And I definitely had those moments. Like there's an image that kind of circulates around social media, and it's like the life of an entrepreneur. And it's just like all these dips and hills, and like you're at your lowest point and then you're at your highest point. And one of those lowest points was my second client actually fired me. I was like 2 months into working with them. They fired me. It was a huge client. I was just doing one simple job. It was receivables. And they said that they wanted like a one-stop shop for their bookkeeping. And I like didn't want the whole account. Like it was going to be huge. They really needed someone probably on staff to do it. And I was devastated. I was like, this is it. Like, this is what entrepreneurship is. Like, I'm done, but my pride was hurt probably more than anything else. And, tax season was right around the corner, and I got like 3 or 4 new clients the next month, and it was a great match. And so, yeah, it's just, there's so many like highs and lows and reasons to quit, but like just remembering your why and remembering why you started is so important.
Yeah, you get kicked in the teeth like on a weekly, monthly basis. And I just watched a special on Netflix by Brene Brown, and she talks about a quote from Theodore Roosevelt talking about being in the arena. Mm-hmm. And, there's people that can say, well, I'm not going to do that, but you're in the arena, you're fighting. But for you and for me and for every entrepreneur, you get kicked in the teeth, but then you get back up and then it's a better day. But you're right. Some days you're manic depressive and it's just like, everything's great. Then 2 days later, you're like, why did I do this?
Yes. Yeah.
But
exactly.
I don't know if you're anything like me, the pros far outweigh the cons.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, awesome. Well, Jessie, that's very inspirational, and I'm proud of you for making this happen. Just as we segue over to the opportunity that's in front of you, like, what's your vision for your business in the next 2 or 3 years? Where do you see you going with this?
That's a great question. I was like kind of thinking about this question because I know you've asked a lot of maybe even all the the bookkeepers that come on the show. And I really like the business. It's growing, and I'm changing and just altering the business in so many ways constantly. I mean, the vision today is going to be different probably than the vision in 6 months, but I would like to eventually, I think, be more of a manager, do more of the consulting with the businesses, helping them grow. I get a lot of businesses that, especially in the startup world, like they aren't as concerned with the bookkeeping because they don't really know what to do with the information, which I know you hit home is like, that's why we have a job. Like, we can take that information and communicate it to them in a way that it will help them grow. And so I think it's kind of a vague answer, but I think like just being able to do that more, like having someone maybe behind the scenes actually doing the bookkeeping, and I can spend more time with the clients and helping them grow. Gotcha.
Okay. So do you have anybody else that helps you right now?
I have a marketing intern, and she just does like some graphics and like posts and stuff for me.
Okay. But other than that, reconciliations,
just me. Yeah.
Financial statement. Okay. And do you like that mold, or do you want to kind of go out, like you said, you want to manage? Do you envision having somebody else in-house that can do those more daily type of functions, and then you can focus on the interaction?
Yeah, I think that's the goal. It's hard because some days I do, if it's, a rainy day, I'm feeling kind of down, I haven't had good interaction with people. Sometimes I'm like, I just want to sit here and reconcile for a couple hours. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost therapeutic. But then other days I'm like, man, I just want to like get out and talk to people and like help them grow and brainstorm. So I think taking more of the bookkeeping off my plate will be good, but I think I'll always want to do some of it. And I know some of it will be overview and overseeing everything, but I don't know. Right now, I do like it.
Well, that's good. That's good. Since it's your profession, right? So that would be, it's like, I'm a teacher, but I hate teaching.
I hate teaching, yeah.
That would not be bad. That would not be good. Okay, so let's talk about the opportunity, because obviously I've looked at your application, but everybody who's listening to this right now has not. So tell me a little bit about the challenge, the opportunity that's in front of you, and let's see how we can help.
Sure. So my heart is really for startups. I love working with startups. I love the energy that the entrepreneurs bring, their vision. And it's very difficult working with startups because they have so much on their plate. For all the bookkeepers listening to this, they remember like those first couple months, you're trying to talk to people, you're trying to make sales, you're figuring out what your offer is, you're figuring out who your ideal client is. And there's just so much to do. And so taking the bookkeeping piece off of their plate is really important. But then also, when they don't have a lot of money coming in, it's tough. It's like, what do I charge? I want to bring a lot of value. But you just kind of like all of those obstacles that get wrapped up in they're just really busy and overwhelmed.
Right. Right. Do you, and so your intention is just to focus on working with startups and then keeping on working with them as they grow and using that kind of as a farm club, if you will, for your clients?
Yeah, it's a lot easier to help from what I found, it's a lot easier to help a business grow and have their bookkeeping done right from the beginning than it is to like jump into $1 million business that has not done their books at all.
Right.
That is like so exhausting to me, and they're usually not willing to change a lot of their ways, and it's kind of an uphill battle almost at that point.
Right. Gotcha. So I've worked with startups in the past, and I've been burned by startups in the past, and I've had good relationships with those in the past. So what I'm about to share with you is kind of my experience. And, obviously with everything, take it as a grain of salt. It's not anecdotal. It could work for me, but it may not work for you. But I think the big challenge, and you kind of hit the nail on the head here, is that they are all over the place. Where business owners already have, like me, the squirrel syndrome. Here's something shiny over here. Bookkeeping is so important today, and tomorrow I'm like, what's bookkeeping? You're just everywhere. And then when you're in startup, that is amplified because it does require you to be everywhere. So when I was working with dentists, I found that some of my best clients were the dentists who were 6 months from starting or buying a practice, all the way up to about 3 to 4 years of owning it, because that's their most susceptible time to, not failing so much, but to putting themselves in the corner because they don't know yet what they don't know. And if I was able to get with that dentist that before she or he bought their practice and work with them as they bought it, and then worked with them in the first couple of years, they were set up for success. But I'll tell you one key differentiator, and what I learned the hard way, is working with the right kind of startups. And in my case, it's dentistry, but it really kind of holds true regardless of what business. So have you ever worked with those startups that like they don't have any money? Which is the case for most. I think that bootstrapping a business is very important, but they have like no money and they have like no direction. Right? They're just out there, and they started a business because they thought this is going to save my world. I don't know if you ever come across those types of clients in your startups, or was it just me?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I would suggest is to work with startups that are true startups that are funded. And what I mean by funded is that you look at their bank account and they don't have $1,000 in there. You look at the equity and it's not negative. You look at, and they have I won't say strong balance sheet at the beginning, but they don't have a lot of debt. They have some money in the account. They've thought this through. They've funded their business, because one of the biggest reasons for business failure is lack of funds. There's a whole lot of other reasons in there, lack of funds, but really lack of marketing and not having a product that the market wants, right? Regardless of what they need. But right here, working with those that have some sort of funding. And here's why. Because what they're going to expect, yes, they want you to do the bookkeeping, or actually they just don't want to do it themselves. Let's put it that way. But if they don't have that money, then you're fighting an uphill battle with them that nothing other than some money can help. And so I would say that as you're vetting your clients is to look at their capital structure, to look at, did they put money into this on their own? That's a huge, huge thing. That's something that I only would work with dentists who put in at least $75,000, if not $100,000 of their own money that they had saved up, or that a rich uncle had given them when he died, whatever the case may be. But it's their money. They have skin in the game. And obviously for dentists who are buying practices, they had to use a lot of debt in there. The biggest thing that I found, though, is to work with those dentists who had that money and had a good business model. So let me ask you this. What kind of startups have you worked with? Like, what's their business model?
Yeah, so a couple of gyms, a couple of Taekwondo studios. And I will say, like, you can tell who has thought it through, just like you said, and who hasn't, who's just kind of like winging it.
Right.
And so that's a huge, huge point. But yeah, a couple of gyms, a couple of Taekwondo studios, a couple of coaching practices.
Yeah. And, so a gym and a taekwondo studio, that requires, quite a bit of startup capital for the physical space, the equipment, and all that goes into it. For something like a coaching practice, obviously that's a service, right? And so it's not as much in startup costs. But my biggest piece of advice is to vet and to qualify them on the front end based upon their capital structure and their business model. At this point, for you, client-wise, do you need to take on more clients because of monetary needs, putting food on the table, being able to pay the bills and such like this? Or is it more just wanting to grow now?
No, yeah, it's I can be pickier now on who I take on.
Okay, good. So what I would tell you is that, as you're going through and working with these startups, number one, it would be nice to see their capital structure, but where do you see the capital structure on the balance sheet? Do they have a balance sheet? No, hence the reason that they're talking to you. So it does take a little bit more investigation. When most of your clients that you've started working with, at what point in their startup phase did you get in contact with them? Did you start working with them? What's the most common area or timeline, I should say?
Timeline, yeah. Usually within like the first 2 years of them being in business, I would say between like that first and second year is usually when we start working together.
Okay. Which is there's pros and cons to that, right? Because they could have burned up all the capital, which would be good because you'd probably know that. The ones that you have worked with, did they have any kind of bookkeeping, accounting records before you started working with them?
Some do, some don't at all. Some it's like a box of receipts, and then some like they tried to do some stuff in QuickBooks Online, but it wasn't great, or they missed things or something like that. Right.
Okay. And I'm asking all these questions because it's kind of leading me to some observations and some recommendations here. When do you prefer, like looking back over the startup clients that you've worked with, when's the optimal point you think that you should be involved in this process?
I mean, it's hard to vet them at the beginning and know who's going to make it and who's not. It's, a year into the business, I think you can know more about what's going on in the business and if they have a structure that's going to last, and it's going to be sustainable. So I would think like around probably the 1 year mark would be ideal for me.
Okay. All right. So you're targeting businesses at least 1 year old. You don't really want to be working with most of them that are 3 months old and things like this.
Yeah, it's a little too early, and they just don't generally have that many transactions that they need to keep track of.
Okay. All right. So first action item that I would say for you, or first piece of recommendation, is that you start, really kind of solidifying who your perfect client is, your avatar, so to speak. And we can share I've shared it about a bazillion times, but I'll tell it again, using the digital marketer's avatar worksheet where you come up with the characteristics of this business. So let's say that this perfect business is at least 1 year old. Are they in any specific industry?
My niche is health and fitness, hence all the gym owners and coaches and things like that. But it's really come down to more the personality of the business owner. Like if I had a cleaning business that I did the books for, and it was not necessarily in my wheelhouse, there was a lot of payroll and just kind of random things. But I loved working with them because they were very type A on it, replied to every email within 24 hours. And it was one of my favorite clients. She actually got bigger and sold her business, which was a bummer, but it was awesome just to see them grow, and because she was so on top of it. So it wasn't necessarily in my niche. It's more health and fitness, but it's more so now the personality of the owner.
Okay. So what we want to do is to get that avatar and really work down on all the different characteristics. They could be industry, they could be financially based, they could be personality based, all the things that you just mentioned about this cleaning client, that they're Johnny spot on, this sort of thing. That's really the first thing that I would tell you to do, is to really get specific about who your ideal client is And when I say specific, I mean specific. Like, what do they read? What do they think? Keeps them awake at night? What is it that they want? What's the struggles that they have? Who else is involved? What does their spouse think? I mean, really doing a deep dive into the financial side of things, but more important, the psychological, the ego-driven type of things. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's one thing right there. So if we had this perfect client filled out, and I say perfect client a little bit tongue in cheek, as I'm pushing my tongue to my cheek right here, because there is no such thing as a perfect client. But what is the client that you're most excited to work with, that you could help the most, that you know by these attributes, financially and otherwise, that you can really help them? That's going to help you to say the second part of this action item. So, but that's the first thing, right? Let's really create this avatar, most ideal client, as many different variables and things. And the best place to start with that is with your favorite clients now. Like, what do they have in common? Personality wise, all this, putting money as one of the things, like how much do they have in equity? Even if you could only look at the bank statements and the payables and kind of quickly run it in your head and say, okay, yeah, they've got $1 million in debt and $4 in the bank. That's probably not a good business to be working with, because they've not set themselves up for success. And you want to work with businesses and help them, but you can't work with distressed businesses. Right. Whether that distressed business is 3 months, 3 years, or 30 years into it, I recommend that, unless that's your specialty and you are a turnaround expert, which most of us are not, then avoid those type of businesses. But creating that clear avatar, who it is that you want to work with. Now, the second part of this, because I know that you want to go and find more of these, right? And by these, that's that most perfect client. So that's why it starts with that. The second thing I would say is that, okay, based upon this avatar, this most likely client, who already has these eyeballs? So who already has the trust of these business owners? Because to start a business, very few people can do it just on their own. So let's think through, where would these people have gone up to this point in their business? Okay. So you can answer some of this. Who's somebody that they have contacted that, if they're a year into business, that they are talking to on at least a frequent basis, monthly, quarterly, something like that? Can you think of anybody?
I mean, I think the CPAs, like I talked about, they generally know these new businesses because they find a tax person right away. I've got a couple connections in the banking industry.
There you go.
Yeah, I haven't had a ton of luck there, but it makes sense because that's, they're going to be opening accounts. They're going to be going there frequently. So,
yep. Now, when you're going after these other professionals, and let's focus in here on banking, right? You want to find those bankers that work with the types of clients that you're talking about here, small businesses, Main Street type of businesses. So when I do that, I go, okay, well, that's not the big banks. They like to work with at least medium-sized businesses, if not Fortune 5,000 type of businesses. So what I would want to do is to say, who already has that? Because the CPA is a great place, but guess what? The CPA is not brought into the mix usually until, hey, oh my gosh, we got to get our tax returns done. So I'm thinking even further back, attorney, all right? They had to have an attorney to form their business, hopefully.
Yeah.
They had to have consulted with most of us get financing, right? Because that's just the name of the game. Hopefully they put some of their own money in there. But I want to think back and say, who already has these people? Who already has them in my pipeline? And that's who I want to establish relationships with. I want to establish relationships with people at the SCORE mentorship, right? That are talking to potential businesses, right? That's one place to go. I would just want to say, who is everybody that already has these eyeballs, and how can I get in front of them? Who has the startup podcasts? Who has the startup books? Who are all these, we think, oh, well, somebody wrote a book that has a podcast about startup. They wouldn't want to talk to me. That's bull. Guess what? They need content. If I had a podcast and I was talking to people starting their businesses, I would love to have guests on. You're a guest here, right? People are like, oh, I don't need to be a guest on there. I'm like, please be a guest. You have something to share with the world. All these different places where you can get your name in front of. And it doesn't take too many of those for you to start getting clients in spades. Now, one thing I would tell you about the bankers and working with them, or the finance people, find out who is also an SBA lender. Small Business Administration in the U.S. and Canada, there's equivalents, but find out who are the bankers who deal in that as well as traditional banking. The difference being that the Small Business Administration, a government entity, backs those loans. So in case your client defaults on them, then they pony up at least part of that. And then other traditional ones. So find out who these people are, any and all. And just like with your CPA relationship that you found on Alignable, you're going to find that one or two of those is going to become a really good relationship and most of the other ones won't. But the best place and the best way to get that referral is to what? To give a referral.
Mm-hmm.
And so establishing this network, not only are you looking for clients from them, but you're really looking for outlets where you know that this banker over there, she's really baller and she takes care of my clients. And I'm going to start by sending you this client right here who needs to refinance because they were taken advantage of by their first bank.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's time for them to refinance. But thinking about that, now when you're working with these bankers, let me go back to that original thought. Now your market is not the client, the startup, the most likely client of 1 year out being in the certain industry. Now your client becomes the banker. What does the banker want? Well, the banker wants to make sure that that client has accurate, timely financial statements so that when the bank examiner comes and looks at his books, says, okay, check, now you're not in trouble. So knowing that and knowing that that's something, a challenge that the banker has to deal with, I got to get in the frame of mind of the referral partner now,
Right.
because now I have two dimensions to sell on. First, the referral partner. I wouldn't want to go in and go, and look, I can keep, I can do financial statements for startups. No, look, I can make sure that when the bank examiner shows up that your clients have good, accurate, timely financial statements. So I would love to work with you to make sure that that happens so that next time the bank examiner comes in here, you don't get a black eye.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And all that. Does that make sense?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The other avenue, and this one would be kind of hitting them from the way that I would do it. The third one is to use just the good old compiled list of new businesses that have been formed or businesses that are at least a year old that are in, when you go through and create this avatar worksheet, you're going to say, who do they listen to? What books do they read? What podcasts do they view? Who are the authorities in this? What are they, are they male, female? Are they between the ages of 25 and 35? You're going to be able to match all this up. And you can get a list of those from someplace like Info USA. And you can start creating content like a web class. Mm-hmm. Where you could send postcards inviting people or do a Facebook ad inviting people to a web class where you teach on a specific subject that is of high importance to them, right? Mm-hmm. Not, how to set up QuickBooks Online. Gag me with a spoon. That's not what they want, right? They want the results of what that would be, right?
Exactly.
How to get your business profitable, as quick as possible. That's a horrible title, but something along those lines of giving them benefit-based. I see so many bookkeeping professionals and accountants doing things like, how to make sure your tax return is done on time. No client in the world cares about that. They don't want to get a fine, but that's not a benefit. That's boring. That would mean that no one would show up. And if they did, they're out of their mind on something like that. But you could you can find a list like that. But I'll tell you, Jessie, probably by doing those first two things and doing the avatar, that you're going to get as many clients as you want. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen overnight.
Gotcha.
Though is the only thing. And of course, the best place to go is with our current clients. But I would want, if I'm really going to go in this, then I would want to be known as the Startup Bookkeeper. Mm-hmm. That whoever is thinking about you, whether it's in your area, worldwide, doesn't matter, that you're just known as that person, right? And that you are delivering a lot of value, a lot of content. Like this podcast, it goes out, I can tell you in April of 2019, it was downloaded over 8,000 times, which is crazy to think for a podcast called I Love Bookkeeping. And I can tell you probably about, I don't know, maybe 5% of those are actually people who have ever been customers of ours, but that's okay. I don't really care. I care about value being presented out there. Yeah. And hey, by the way, it's also a great outlet. People are like, hey, I joined because I heard the I Love Bookkeeping podcast and I thought it was great. I'm like, oh, great. That's awesome. Same thing here with you, right? You're going to be putting out a lot of stuff, a lot of content, and you're not going to get paid back immediately for this. And most of the people who ever come across your content, most of the referral partners you ever try to make contact with, they're never going to pan out. But those ones that do, as you have already found in the CPA world, are the ones that's all that you need.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I love the results-based marketing. Just recently, I would say in the last couple of months, like really clicked for me. And I'm still learning and practicing it, but just because it's not super natural sometimes to like talk about the results before the process, but that is what people care about and that's what they want to hear about. So yeah, just doing that directly to startups, like how to be profitable in the first, 30, 60 days, whatever. So yeah, I love that.
Now I have another crazy idea, and I don't mind giving it to you here and to everyone who listens, because very few people will take action on this. But I want to tell you the other thing that I would do, that I was starting to do when I sold my practice. Would you like to know? A little bonus thing here for you? Okay. Yeah. So one of the things that I would tell you to do is that people in startup, so that people from 6 months of starting their business all the way up to that 1 year where you want to take them over, they have a certain challenge, right? They don't know anything about finance. They don't know anything about setting up the books. They don't know what they don't know. If I were you, would create a lot of content that was catering towards them, right? That is, you build it once, and whether one person reads it or 1 million people read it, it doesn't matter. You've created it. It doesn't take a lot of time. I would want to be known as like, hey, I'm looking for a chart of accounts, or I'm looking for how to fire up QuickBooks for the first time, or I'm looking for how to fill out this very common loan application. I don't know that world as well as you do, but figuring out what their challenges are, because here's what I would want to do is to eventually create a lot of content, a lot of blog stuff, and then maybe a paid course that's, less than $500, probably less than $200 for them, where you can generate a lot of money without a lot of work ongoing. It's a heck of a lot of work to build it at the first, but then as it goes. But what you're doing is you're building a tribe. And when people, the ones that get out of that phase and get to that current point, that's when you can have them self-select and say, schedule a consultation with me and let's see if this is a good fit. So if you had 1,000 people in that funnel, probably every single month you could take 5 or 10 of those and convert those over to clients. I'm painting in broad strokes, but you get the hint. That's not something I would start off with, but knowing that and knowing that you're giving away, even if they didn't pay you a dime for a paid course, that you've given them so much value that when it comes time for them, they're just going to say, hey, Jessie, here, take over my books, please. They're going to be like, hey, shut up and take my money. This is very important because I know that you are the person, you're the startup bookkeeper, right?
Awesome. Yeah. That
would be it. Matter of fact, let me just look at something real quick. I just wanted to see if there was this such site, startupbookkeeper.com. Looks like somebody has it. Yeah. But anyway, just being known and branding yourself as such, I think that you could build this thing, as big as you want. And then another good thing about this business is that your clients are going to be growing with you. And if you can help them to stay in business and to avoid the traps that most small businesses fall into, and you're working with people who want to be worked with, who are going to do what you say, who are setting themselves up for success, that's going to make all the difference in the world.
Awesome. Yeah.
Does that help?
Yes, that is good. Ideal client, startups, and then just free value content.
Yeah. And finding out who already has their eyeballs, right? I mean, there's a lot of different stuff. You could follow the Daniel Honan model, where he would send a postcard to his niche was painters. That would lead them to a web class where he would deliver a lot of value. From that web class, his call to action was schedule a consultation. He would put them through a qualification period. He would qualify, he would have that consultation, and he would only close like 90% of everybody who got on that call. It was a no-brainer by that point.
Right.
So anyway, I think that's the smart way to go about doing it. I have a little bit of experience, but again, mine's based off the dentistry world, but same characteristics as working with people who are funded in some capacity, and you're not working with basket cases, so to speak.
Yeah.
All right, Jessie, any other questions that I can help you with here?
No, I think I'm good. That was super helpful. Thank you so much for your time.
You are very welcome. You're very welcome. And I hope to have a follow-up with you at some point. so that we can hear about all the success, things that you have been doing on this. I mean, you're having huge success already. So congratulations.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd love to come back.
All right. Well, that is Jessie White. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Awesome. Thank you.
Listen, if you would like to hear more great conversations just like today's, then I want you to head on over to ilovebookkeeping.com. There, you're going to find all of the shows, the notes, and some other great goodies that we have for you there. Now, if you'd like to be a guest on the I Love Bookkeeping show, there is a link that says Be a Guest. Go in there and we'll walk you through the process of getting on the show. And finally, to discover more about our programs, go to the courses page on the ilovebookkeeping.com site. There you have it, another great episode of I Love Bookkeeping. Thank you for being a proud listener, and thank you for being a bookkeeping professional. Enjoy the rest of your week.
I love bookkeeping. Here's a little shout to all my friends working hard at keeping the books. You want to